Hey guys, Pete here. This will be my Better Call Saul Season 5, Episode 2 recap and review. 50% Off did something I'm really excited about. It brought Jimmy back into Nacho's orbit at the end, which means we may see the two different parts of this story finally mesh back together in preparation for the endgame. Spoiler warning, if you haven't watched Episode 2 of Better Call Saul Season 5, this video will spoil it for you. Hit the subscribe button, tap the bell for notifications, and then go watch the episode. Come back here after because I will be making videos throughout this season. Season 5's second episode is titled 50% Off. That's in reference to the deal that Jimmy discussed with Kim in episode 1. She thought it might come off as encouraging people to commit crimes if he made this offer. He didn't think that was possible since of course these guys are criminals and they're already out there doing that anyway. But he did decide not to use the offer, only to change his mind in the heat of the moment later when he was around the customers. The episode, written by Allison Tatlock and directed by Norberto Barba, follows two characters who were indeed inspired to go on a spree by Saul's offer because, dude, that's like almost half. These two Badger and Skinny Pete-esque flunkies go on a meth-filled tear that makes for an enjoyable opening montage. I mentioned in my episode 1 video that Nacho is the most interesting part of the cartel side of things for me, and after the opening credits, we get a reminder of just how messed up his situation is, and this does turn out to be a pretty Nacho-heavy episode. Tyrus and Victor snatch him out of bed, and you got a feel for Nacho here since he has no idea why this is happening, considering he did exactly what Gus instructed him to do. If being forced out of bed in the middle of the night isn't bad enough, things quickly escalate to the worst case nightmare scenario that he finds himself in. They take him to a place where his father is hanging out, and Victor goes inside with a gun while Nacho has to sit there and watch. Gus gets inside the car and tells Nacho that he needs to know what Lalo Salamanca is up to, where he is going, what he's thinking, what he is planning. I need to know what he's going to do before he does it. Nacho has been trying to keep tabs, but Lalo has been primarily focused on Werner and Mike. Gus uses the threat to Papa to get Nacho to try harder, and this is classic Breaking Bad Gus Fring. This is the guy who slit Victor's throat in front of Walt and Jesse, and by the end of this interaction, Nacho knows his neck is on the line. Because Lalo doesn't believe Gus's cover story about the construction project, he goes to visit his tío Hector at Casa Tranquila. While he's talking about Don Eladio and Juan Bolsa not caring about Gus because of the money that he makes, Hector gets his bell-ringing finger in high gear. Lalo gets the message and realizes the only way to get at Gus is to mess with his money and get him in trouble with the cartel. Nacho and Lalo come together at a poker game where we see how Domingo, who we know as Crazy 8 from Breaking Bad, got his name. Lalo takes the opportunity to make a big bluff holding 7 deuce on the river to get Domingo to fold the best hand. Before he drags the pot, he flips over his opponent's hand to see that he had a set of 8s. As he collects the chips, he says, "Ocho Loco, this guy," and the name Crazy 8 is born. While the Salamanca crew was playing poker, our 50% off numbskulls had arrived at the stash house looking to score 10 bags. Apparently their spree is still ongoing, and based on the big buy, it appears that things are going their way. The bags got stuck in the drain pipe on the way down, and so now Crazy 8 has to come to the spot and try to figure out what's going on. He gets up on a ladder to try to fix the pipe. Right at the same time, the cops roll up on the location. Everyone scatters and they all get away, but he's left on the ladder and has to talk to the police when he gets down. As he's doing that, he taps on the pipe, the bags drop out right in front of them, and he gets arrested. Lalo and Nacho arrive on the scene to check on the stash house, and this provides an opportunity for Nacho to make a daring attempt to earn Lalo's trust. He sneaks into the house because there's still a lot of drugs there, and he recovers the stash just before the police bust down the door. While it's a little crazy, this should help move things in the right direction for him. One of the things that makes Lalo a good character is that he's no dummy, but I really doubt that this will strike him as a desperate move by someone who is working against his interests. That seems to be confirmed later when back at the restaurant, Lalo makes food and has Nacho eat with him so that they can discuss Crazy 8. The most exciting thing about all of this is that Domingo, aka Crazy 8, is now in custody. Considering we know he was a confidential informant for the DEA and specifically for one Hank Schrader in the Breaking Bad timeline, and that we also know that Hank will be making an appearance in the next couple of episodes, that table is now set. After watching him fold the best hand in the poker game, Lalo has to be wondering if he'll be able to hold up under the pressure of being questioned. When Nacho asks if he wants him to take care of it, Lalo says, "No, I got something much better for him." This is probably tied to what we see at the end of the episode, so we'll pick back up with it when we get there. In Jimmy and Kim land, things aren't going very smoothly. It feels like Kim is angry about what happened with her pro bono client, on top of not being fully on board with the decision to practice law as Saul Goodman. Jimmy's plans to bring customers in is working, but he can also sense the unease that Kim is having. He tries to improve the situation by taking her to an open house to give her some hope about a future they could have together. This seems to work on some level as she turns the shower on with him inside, getting him all wet. That's a reminder that they do have strong feelings for each other and enjoy each other despite the current situation. On the way out, she says maybe someday, and it's comforting to see that there are feelings that a future could be built on still there. Earlier at home, Kim asked Jimmy how he was going to deal with so many new clients, and we see him take things head on at the courthouse. We see him wheeling and dealing again with Bill from the DA's office, but he's got bigger things on his mind with ADA Susan Erickson, who you'll remember from Huell's case last season. While he's waiting for her, he runs into Howard Hamlin, who makes his first season 5 appearance, and I must say he's looking a whole lot better than the last time we saw him. Howard congratulates Jimmy on being reinstated and mentions that Hamlin McGill is set to have one of their best years ever. He seems genuinely happy to see Jimmy, even if he doesn't really like the new choice of name, and the idea that things are going so well at HHM is definitely surprising. The big surprise here, though, is that Howard asked Jimmy to have lunch with him. We don't get to find out what it's all about, though, because Suzanne exits the courtroom. We learn that she is assigned to 16 of Jimmy's cases, and he wants to work out some deals to get them settled quickly. Suzanne sees straight through him and calls him out on wanting quick turnover so that he can make more money. Her instincts here are good, and she's not willing to work out deals with Jimmy ahead of their scheduled meeting that's coming up the next week. Jimmy, as Saul, has gotten himself into this situation by offering the discounted rates, and this is where he actually thrives. If she won't respond to his request, then he will concoct a way to get an audience. This plays out in him setting up for them to get stuck in an elevator together. He finds a maintenance man who could use some extra cash and some legal services, and when all is said and done, they have come to an agreement on 13 out of the 16 cases after being stuck in the elevator together for 20 minutes. After he pulls that off, things are looking pretty good for Saul, but little does he know this day is about to take a turn. Before we get into that, we have to address Mike's current situation. We catch up with him at home. He's in bed and he looks rough. The phone is ringing next to empty beer cans and liquor bottles, and he's not moving very quickly to address that. It turns out Stacy is the one who's calling, and she needs him to come over and watch Kaylee, which he agrees to without question. When he arrives, things start off well. He goes into full-on grandpa mode. He helps her with the multiplication tables, using the example of a football game and touchdowns for sevens, and he makes some progress on the construction of her treehouse. When the discussion turns to Kaylee asking questions about her dad, though, things go terribly off the rails. We know that Mike's going through a lot of stuff. He's currently dealing with the remorse over Werner, and it appears that thinking about Maddie and what happened to him after he joined the police force to be a cop like Mike is sufficient enough to send him over the edge. He completely loses his cool with his granddaughter, yelling, "You either do it right or you don't do it," which leads to her running away to her room. When her mom returns, he leaves without explaining much other than Kaylee was in her room and wouldn't eat dinner. We know Mike can be a hard person when he has to be, but this was pretty perplexing and difficult to watch. If there was any question as to how he's holding up after the events of season 4, I think this clears it up. We close out the episode with Jimmy, who's enjoying an ice cream cone after his elevator encounter with the ADA. He's taking calls and working his magic as Nacho pulls up, which I'm guessing is related to Lalo's plans that he mentioned earlier. It's actually been a long time since these two have been together, way back in season 1 with the Kettlemans, and the way things were left at that time, Jimmy has no choice but to go along with Nacho here, as he does owe him. He gets in the car. Unfortunately, the ice cream cone Cone can't come along, which is a big loss, and they drive off together, and this is sort of like everything finally coming full circle. Better Call Saul is undoubtedly one of the best television shows that's on currently. But if there's one criticism that comes up about the show over and over, it's about how the two stories, the one with Jimmy and the one with Mike, kind of exist beside each other rather than being intertwined. That's what makes this ending so exciting. The fact that Jimmy is going to have to work for Nacho, which of course works for Lalo, really moves us firmly into the end game. Remember, when we first met Jimmy, these are the two people's names he mentioned whenever he was being questioned by Walt and Jesse. The show has taken some time to get there, actually more time than what they had originally planned, based on the fact that Jimmy and Chuck and that whole storyline was so good, but now we have finally arrived. It's funny on top of that because Jimmy's deal, his 50% off deal, is what set off the spree that landed those two kids outside of the stash house. That set up Domingo, aka Crazy 8, getting busted, and now he's bringing Jimmy, Nacho, Lalo, Gus, Mike, and everybody inevitably back together. It's a pretty exciting ending and a pretty good episode overall. We're starting to see Jimmy hit his stride as being Saul Goodman. We're starting to see the divide between him and Kim widen a little bit, and we're primed to cross over with Breaking Bad characters Hank and Gomi, which is going to provide a lot of fan service at the same time. I like the 1-2 punch they delivered here with these first two episodes, releasing them back to back. Everything seems to be caught up to speed and the table seems to be set. I'm curious to see what Lalo is up to. Hector telling him to go after the money is interesting, and of course how he's going to choose to deal with Domingo now that he's been taken into custody. I hope we don't spend too much time with Mike being in this dark place that he's at in this episode. With so much other stuff going on, it seems a little bit superfluous in that we know where Mike's story goes, but I'm not exactly worried about it because I have a lot of trust in the writers of this television show because they are some of the best in the game. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought about this episode. How do you feel about season 5 so far? It's kind of strange because it's hard to decide whether it's Jimmy or Saul a lot of times when I'm writing these things out now. He's still somewhere in between, and depending on if he's with Kim or if he's at work, we see a little bit of both still. That brings up the idea that I've heard Bob Odenkirk say in a couple of different interviews before this season started about how Saul is a persona. What we see in Breaking Bad is a persona. I'll be interested to see how his evolution continues. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please leave comments or questions and let me know where you think things are going. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll be covering this season and the final one all the way through. I may come up with a couple bonus videos in between, but I'll definitely be doing weekly recaps at the bare minimum. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.